Patient's burden in clinical trials with innovative technology. We tried to come up with a longer title. But I think first, Scott, we should probably just introduce ourselves and maybe go to the next slide.
Let's do that.
So this is Scott Schleibner. What's interesting about Scott is he runs one of the largest rare disease practices of a CRO in the world. He's worked very hard over the last several years to do that. He's been in the industry for 20 years and is the Vice President of Scientific Affairs. I actually think your title's quite a bit longer, but we'll stop there, and that's Scott. And so he'll be speaking to us today.
Thanks for giving a brief. This is David Turner, CEO and founder of Parallel 6, which is a PRA health sciences company. But in addition to being a former Marine and a native Louisianan, David's been in the kind of technology software startup space for a long time. We're thrilled to kind of integrate this platform into what we do. And I think this is a fantastic match because we bring kind of clinical development expertise, but as a lot of us know, if you can bring some perspectives from outside of our industry being one that could be a little archaic at times, and bring some fresh perspectives in, it's really great. So kind of, because this is a little bit of a match made in heaven, I got you a Valentine.
Oh, we didn't rehearse this.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, that's really nice.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Happy hour does start in a little while. We're going to keep this fun and a little bit interactive, so stay with us.
So let's first start off with the story of Kodak, because we're talking about disruption, and we're talking about disruption in this industry. We've been doing things the same way for many years, and I have conversations with people, and we hear it, right? Like, how do you increase retention in trials? How do you make things go better? And I wanted to start with the story of Kodak, because this is a company that was born in 1888, and it was the inventor of the digital camera. About 10 years ahead of everybody else who had the digital camera, and all they did was focus on film. And they said, well, this digital camera is really cool, but it's not as clear as the film, and so we're going to keep focusing on the film. And Polaroid came in, and Polaroid started kind of nipping at their heels a little bit, and then more digital cameras were coming out with Sony and Canon, and Polaroid said, nope, nobody's ever going to move away from this film, and so at the end of the day, Kodak ended up declaring Chapter 11. And it was just a classic case of a company, and I think the ditches are full of companies like this that don't have enough creative confidence to move forward. They focus too much on the way things have been done, and they don't think about the intersection of technology and consumer and when that intersection is going to hit in the future. And when we talk about transforming clinical trials and putting together configurations for rare disease patients, it's not, we have to be very careful, because as we begin to innovate and we disrupt the industry, we want to make sure that we're not taking the site burden and turning it into a patient burden.
Or vice versa.
A
patient burden, and don't want to put more burden on sites.
Yeah, and so it's creative confidence coupled with innovation that actually brings us forward in this industry. And I've had several conversations with people, and sometimes I just think, God, like 1998 called and they wanted their paper diary back.
Right.
So.
Right. And for somebody who's been in the clinical development space for, I'm really old, it's coming up on 25 years, we all see, I think, in our industry, some pockets that are really not looking ahead, right? And they're not looking forward at innovation. And we also know we have the Apples out there, we have the Googles, we have the Amazons who are on the sidelines looking at some things that we do with paper charts still sometimes, or practices not being linked to one another, or the amount of time it takes for an IRB review or a contract to be signed. There's huge inefficiencies, and we know there's companies out there that are looking to come in and disrupt. So our approach is to sort of be a little bit more of a disruptor ourselves and take it forward a bit.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we loved about PRA, and I see a lot of friendly faces in the crowd, and you may not have heard that we at Parallel 6 are now a PRA company. And when disruption happens, it happens. Another great example is Kroger, and we all know Kroger, the big chain of grocery stores, multi-billion-dollar company. And if you look at their stock chart over the last couple of years, there's one day where their stock went down about 30% in one day, and they lost billions and billions of dollars on that day. And it's since has had trouble climbing back up, and it was a day that Amazon bought Whole Foods. So when we're talking about disrupting a market, it is sometimes vicious and it happens fast.
Great. So thinking, I mean, a lot of you may not necessarily work in the rare disease space specifically, but I think the great thing about the rare disease patients and the rare disease space is that there are some unique challenges that we have to overcome. There's hurdles in this space that really require, you know, it's that whole invention. What is it? The mother of invention is necessity, or something like that, right?
Necessity is the mother of all invention.
So we've been forced to think in innovative manners about how do we bring clinical trials to these patients and families. How do we get these therapies to rare disease patients? This slide has a whole list of different kinds of challenges that we face in this space, and I'm not going to read off all of those to you, but I think maybe like three big kind of areas that we focus on when we think about rare disease patients is probably number one, like geographically dispersed. So patients are rare, there are not many of them by definition. They don't live down the street from Dana-Farber necessarily, right? So we're talking automatically about great travel distances and inconveniences. We're sometimes dealing with debilitating diseases that patients are non-ambulatory. So that becomes a huge challenge in this space. Number two, I think a lot of these disease cases and indications are, about half of them occur in children. So pediatric rare becomes two complex things overlapping. And when you're talking about a child in a clinical trial, you're obviously also talking about their parents. You might even be talking about their siblings. So the reality is you're really enrolling an entire family in a trial often. And to make it even more challenging, these diseases are often not simple little scenarios. They're multidisciplinary. You might have multiple different specialties involved: neurologists, immunologists, pediatricians, genetic testing. So you end up with this circle of care, really, that's both on the patient side as well as the clinical side, and you have a lot of players involved. So that's complex in terms of whether it's data or contracts or communication. So that's really key. So that's number two, is kind of the circle of care is big. And then I think the last part is these studies themselves and the clinical trials can be really different and novel, different designs. Sometimes there has never been a clinical trial in an indication of this sort. So what's the endpoint going to be? There's not necessarily a roadmap to follow. So we're dealing with geography. We're dealing with the complex nature of a complete care circle. And then we have this environment of clinical trials that are a little bit different and complex and unique. And so that poses unique challenges. It requires us to get a little bit innovative.
So we're talking today about Clinical 6, and this is actually our first announcement of this. And PRA doesn't do a lot of press releases, but today we're announcing Clinical 6, which is an enterprise platform that enrolls, engages, and manages patients digitally throughout our trial. The Clinical 6 platform was invented by us at Parallel 6, and we have run trials in all the different phases. We enable virtual trials as well. We do site-based trials, but today we're actually announcing a specific rare disease configuration for the Clinical 6 platform. And I want to talk a little bit about kind of what we're doing in the rare disease space, even though we're doing other things in other phases. Or other spaces, but specific to rare disease, a good example is a gene therapy study that we're running that we talked about earlier. It's a 20-year gene therapy follow-up study, and the concerns of the clinical team was, how do we follow these patients for 20 years? The patients start out at the age of 4 years old, and they go to a single doctor. They have the gene therapy, and then we have to follow them for 20 years and get symptom reports and take surveys. I heard you speaking about surveys and other things from these patients, and these patients are children. And so how do you pull in the care circle around these patients, and how do you get them all together? And so using the Clinical 6 technology, we actually pulled all of that together, and we configured the study so that there was a global PI. And the global PI administers the gene therapy, and these patients are going to pop up, 50 of them over the next 5 years. And whenever they go in to get the gene therapy, they're going to their parents. Will download a mobile app, enroll in the trial, and that mobile app's going to open in the actual language that's set on the handset. And then the first thing the parents are going to do is they're going to invite their primary care physician into the study. And their primary care physician is then going to download a mobile app that connects them directly to the patient. And as the patient goes through his or her life, the parents are giving symptom reports, the primary care physician is filling out forms, and all of it's getting translated specifically to the language of the global PI. There are video consults that are involved, and with the 8-way video consults, we can actually have translators from PRA go on to the video console and translate between the caregivers, the primary care physicians, and the global PI. So dropping costs, breaking down the barriers of geography that you were speaking about, producing that care circle, and really having the unique study design are just some of the things that our new Clinical 6 rare disease configuration can enable.